This is an analysis from Alpha Business Media. Today, we're deconstructing a critical economic puzzle in Nepal, the agricultural value chain. And more importantly, we're asking why the people at its very foundation so often see the smallest benefit. Now, this isn't some hypothetical scenario. It's the harsh reality for many farmers in Nepal. It perfectly captures a deep and damaging paradox, right? You have a system where abundance at the farm leads to waste, while just down the road, consumers in the city are paying massively inflated prices. It's a disconnect that strikes right at the heart of the nation's food system. And that really brings us to the central question of our entire analysis today. If we want to understand Nepal's agricultural economy, we first have to figure out why its primary producers are so often trapped in this cycle of economic vulnerability. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll define the paradox. Then we'll dive into what we're calling the great squeeze on farmers. After that, we'll explore some key pathways to empowerment. And finally, we'll outline an action plan for building a more equitable future. Okay, Section 1, the farmer's paradox. To really get a handle on this contradiction, you have to understand the sheer scale of the agricultural sector here. You know, for millions in Nepal, it isn't just one part of the economy. It is the economy. When you look at the data, you see this stark contrast immediately. A sector that employs over 60% of the entire workforce and makes up 24% of GDP is built on the backs of smallholder farmers who remain incredibly economically fragile. That is the fundamental contradiction we're talking about. All right, Section 2, inside the Great Squeeze. This is where we diagnose the systemic issues that are causing all this pressure. We're going to answer the question, why is so much value being lost between the farm and the final consumer? Well, a huge part of the answer lies in this one number, 7. That's how many different intermediaries, how many middlemen, can stand between a farmer and a city market. Each one of those layers adds its own markup, which creates a long, inefficient, and very expensive supply chain. And financially, the impact is just crystal clear. Research shows that, on average, more than 57% of the final price of produce is eaten up by the supply chain. Think about that. It means the farmer, who takes on all the production risk, gets less than 43% of the value. This system is definitely profitable for the middlemen, but it's deeply inefficient for the broader economy. But the pressure on farmers doesn't just come from within the country's borders. It also comes from a really crippling dependency on imports. And this creates what you could call a punishing double trap. So this dependency squeezes farmers from two different directions. On one side, you have cheap food imports coming in from across the border, which pushes local crop prices down. And then on the other side, their production costs are basically held hostage by an unreliable supply of imported fertilizers, with prices that can swing wildly based on global events they have absolutely no control over. So, what about government intervention? Well, so far, it's been pretty ineffective. Our sources point to this recurring pattern. You get well-intentioned policies that just completely fail in their execution. Minimum support prices aren't legally enforced, organic farming initiatives lack any real follow-through, and huge subsidies for imported fertilizers actually work against the stated goal of a sustainable ag sector. Now for Section 3, paths to farmer empowerment. Now, despite these really deep-seated problems, the situation is not without hope. So our analysis is going to pivot now to the solutions. We'll examine 4 proven strategies that can begin to shift the balance of power back to the farmers. These strategies really focus on a few key areas: collective action through cooperatives, building stable partnerships with contract farming, capturing more of the value through local processing, and, of course, bridging the information gap with digital tools. And let me be clear, these are not just theories. They have a measurable real-world impact. Farmers in cooperatives can earn 10 to 20% more. The data on contract farming is even more striking. We're talking about ginger farmers seeing a 58% jump in net profits. That is tangible, life-changing money. However, we have to look at these solutions with a clear eye. Contract farming, for example, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, it offers a guaranteed market and a stable income, but without a strong legal framework in place to protect small farmers, it carries a very serious risk of exploitation. It could turn them into dependent laborers instead of empowered entrepreneurs. Technology also presents its own kind of paradox. You know, while digital tools like mobile apps have enormous potential to deliver market prices and farming advice, the reality on the ground is stark. A mere 3.5% of farmers in one study were actually using them. So what's going on? Well, the failure isn't in the technology itself, it's in the implementation.
Limited internet, low digital literacy, and apps that just aren't designed for the local context, they all create a massive barrier. The models that work best are actually hybrids, using trusted local groups like cooperatives to bridge that digital divide.
And that brings us to our final section, building a fairer future. Here we're going to pull everything together into a concrete action plan for systemic change. Because fixing this paradox requires a coordinated effort from everybody involved. If there's one single strategic shift that's most important, it's this: moving away from a reliance on volatile imported inputs. Embracing local, sustainable, organic practices isn't just an environmental goal, it's a core strategy for achieving economic stability and food security.
This really means everyone has a role to play. Policymakers have to create the right legal frameworks and redirect those subsidies. Development partners need to support cooperative-based processing and those hybrid tech solutions. And of course, farmers themselves must continue to join forces, building that collective power from the ground up.
Ultimately, the question isn't whether Nepal's farmers can succeed, but rather how the entire system can be redesigned to ensure that they do. Transforming this vital sector from a source of vulnerability into a true engine of prosperity remains one of the most critical economic challenges facing the nation today.